Welcome to Crossdressing Stories. Here, we share personal stories, celebrate self-expression. If you're on your own journey or simply curious, you've found your community. Subscribe and join the conversation.
Ben's life was like the house his wife, Julianna, had designed. A minimalist masterpiece of glass, steel, and concrete that was breathtakingly beautiful, but cold and unforgiving of clutter. At 35, Ben was a struggling novelist, the author of one critically acclaimed but commercially failed book. He lived in Julianna's shadow. Julianna wasn't just a world-renowned architect, she was a force of nature. Decisive, brilliant, and terrifyingly controlled, she had built her career by imposing her vision on the world. She loved Ben, but she loved him the way she loved one of her designs. She appreciated his lines, but was constantly wanting to improve what she saw as his flaws. His sensitivity, his artistic temperament, to her, these were weaknesses to be managed. The biggest project of Julianna's career was on the line. She had been shortlisted to design the Museum of the Future, a global cultural project funded by a reclusive and notoriously eccentric benefactor named Madame Eva Rostova. Rostova wasn't just a client, she was a guru, a futurist with radical ideas about society, art, and gender. The problem was Rostova had rejected all of Julianna's initial designs. "They are too masculine," she had written in a curt email. "Too rigid. Too logical. They lack empathy. They lack flow." The door seemed to be closed until a strange invitation arrived. Madame Rostova had invited Julianna and her design partner to her secluded, high-tech estate in Switzerland for 1 month. It wasn't a vacation. It was a test, a final chance for Julianna to prove she could understand Rostova's vision. Ben was in his study, staring at a blank page, when Julianna walked in. She was holding 2 thick, leather-bound portfolios. "You're coming with me to Switzerland," she announced, not as a question. "You're going to be my design partner." Ben gave a dry laugh. "Jules, I know nothing about architecture. I'm a writer." "Precisely," she said, her eyes gleaming with an intense, focused light. "Rostova wants empathy. She wants a different perspective. You're the sensitive one. You understand emotion. But she won't listen to a man." She pushed one of the portfolios across the desk. "She's famously biased. She believes the male brain is hobbled by logic and ego. She would dismiss your input out of hand." The casual cruelty of her assessment stung. So, Julianna continued, her voice becoming dangerously soft and persuasive. "I've created a solution. A narrative. I've told her that my partner, the one who brings the emotional balance to my work, is also my life partner." She opened her own portfolio. Inside were architectural sketches, but also fashion drawings and a detailed character profile. "You won't be going as Ben," she said, her gaze locking with his. "You'll be going as Bree. My partner, my muse, and my creative collaborator. We will do this together. We will win this contract. I need your sensitivity, but I need it in a vessel she will accept." Ben stared at the portfolio. The name Bree was written in a sleek, architectural font. Below it were sketches of a woman, a tall, slender, androgynous figure with soft, artistic clothes and an intense, thoughtful expression. It was an idealized, feminized version of himself. "Jules, this is insane," he said, pushing the portfolio away. "You want me to dress up as a woman for a month? To lie to this person's face? I'm a writer, not an actor. Aren't we all actors?" Julianna countered, her voice smooth and reasonable, the voice she used to convince a hesitant city council to approve a controversial design. "You play the part of the struggling novelist. I play the part of the infallible architect. This is just a more deliberate performance. For a higher stake." "This is different," he insisted, his voice rising. "This is my identity. You can't just redesign me like one of your buildings." The softness in her face vanished, replaced by the cool, hard pragmatism that had made her a star. "Oh, can't I?" she said, her voice dropping. "Who paid for this house, Ben? Who pays for the food you eat, the clothes you wear, the very laptop you failed to write your next novel on? I have built this entire world for us. Your identity has contributed nothing to it but a few good reviews and a lot of existential dread. The words were brutal, but they were true. He was a dependent, a kept man. His one success felt like a fluke, and the blank page had been his tormentor for over a year. I am on the verge of the most important commission of my life, she continued, her voice regaining its persuasive warmth. It's the key to our future, to our financial security for the rest of our lives. It's the project that will define my legacy. And the only thing standing in the way is a client's bizarre, sexist prejudice and your artistic temperament. She came around the desk and knelt beside his chair, placing a cool, gentle hand on his arm. I'm not asking you to become someone else, Ben. I'm asking you to help me. I'm asking you to lend me your beautiful, sensitive mind. I'll handle the technical side. You will be the soul of the project. You will talk to her about art, about philosophy, about feeling. You will be the part of me that I can't be. And to do that, you just need to wear a different uniform. She made it sound so reasonable, so logical. A simple, practical solution to a design problem. He looked at her intense, pleading, and utterly determined face. He loved this woman. He admired her strength, her ambition, even her ruthlessness. And he was acutely, painfully aware of his own failure to provide, to be an equal partner in their marriage. He felt a familiar, crushing weight of guilt and obligation. Maybe she was right. Maybe his sensitivity, the very thing he valued in himself, was useless in its current form. Maybe it needed a different vessel to be heard. What would I have to do? He whispered, and in that question, he had already surrendered. A triumphant, brilliant smile lit up her face. That's the easy part, she said, standing up, all business again. I've already designed everything. She tapped the portfolio. The clothes, the hair, the backstory. I've even designed a new way for you to walk. We'll start tomorrow. Think of it as the most intensive character study you've ever undertaken. Julianna was, above all else, an architect of detail. The transformation of Ben into Bree was not a haphazard affair. It was a project, executed with the same meticulous, obsessive precision she applied to her buildings. The deconstruction began the next morning. Julianna had cleared her schedule. She brought in a team of specialists, not to a salon, but to the sterile, private space of their home. First came a stylist, a severe man named Anton. He didn't just cut Ben's already short hair, he reshaped it, creating a softer, asymmetrical style that could be brushed forward to obscure the harsh lines of his forehead. The color was subtly lightened, warming his complexion. Next, an esthetician was summoned for a full-body waxing. The process was as clinical and humiliating as Ben had imagined. He lay on a portable table set up in their guest bathroom, his body being methodically, painfully stripped of its masculinity. The esthetician then gave him a facial, a process that felt both absurd and unnervingly intimate, leaving his skin feeling soft and foreign to his own touch. The most jarring part of the physical transformation was the postural realignment. Julianna had hired a movement coach who worked with ballet dancers. Ben was forced to stand in front of their floor-to-ceiling living room windows, which acted as a giant mirror, while the coach physically manipulated his body. Your center of gravity is in your chest, the coach explained, her hands pressing on his shoulders. Masculine. Aggressive. We must lower it. Settle it in the hips. Everything must flow from the core. He was taught to stand with his weight shifted, to walk with a longer, more fluid stride that was neither masculine nor overtly feminine, but simply graceful. It was a walk, Julianna explained, that spoke of an artist's quiet confidence. But the true architecture of the deception was in the clothes. Julianna had not just bought a few dresses. She had designed and commissioned an entire wardrobe for Bree. It was a collection of beautiful, androgynous, and artistic garments in a palette of charcoal gray, soft cream, and deep ink blue. There were wide-legged silk trousers, long, flowing tunic-style shirts, and soft, unstructured blazers. The fabrics were fluid, designed to move with the new, graceful walk he was learning. Getting dressed in these new clothes was a profound act of dislocation. The soft silk felt unnervingly light against his newly smooth skin. The cut of the trousers, the drape of the shirts, they were all designed for a body that was not his, but that he was now being forced to inhabit. The final piece of the external puzzle was his face. Julianna didn't want a heavy, theatrical makeup. Bree is authentic, she stated. The look is minimal, intellectual. She had consulted with a makeup artist and now directed the application herself. A light foundation to even out his skin tone. A subtle grooming of his eyebrows to create a softer arch. A clear balm on his lips. It wasn't a mask, it was a subtle, disturbing blurring of the lines. He looked at his reflection. The person looking back was an elegant, androgynous stranger. The face was his, but softer. The body was his, but it moved differently, was draped in unfamiliar fabrics. He was a building that had been completely renovated, the old structure still there, but hidden under a new, beautiful, and utterly alien facade. He was Julianna's greatest and most monstrous design. Madame Rostova's estate in the Swiss Alps was less a house and more a self-contained ecosystem. It was a marvel of futuristic, organic architecture, a series of interconnected glass pods nestled into the side of a mountain, all powered by geothermal energy and governed by a central AI. It was a place of breathtaking beauty and profound, unsettling isolation. Upon their arrival, they were greeted not by a person, but by a calm, disembodied voice that emanated from invisible speakers. "Welcome, Julianna. Welcome, Bree. Madame Rostova is expecting you in the conversation pod." Ben, now fully inhabiting the role of Bree, moved with a practiced, quiet grace, the flowing, ink-blue trousers and tunic he was wearing whispering with each step. He felt a strange, detached calm. The sheer, overwhelming strangeness of the environment made his own bizarre situation feel almost normal in comparison. Madame Rostova was waiting for them in a circular, glass-walled room that overlooked a dizzying mountain vista. She was a woman who seemed to defy age, with a cascade of silver-white hair and eyes that were a startling, intelligent blue. She was dressed in a simple, flowing white garment that was impossible to define. "Julianna," she said, her voice a low, melodic hum. "You have come." Her gaze then shifted to Ben. "And this is the muse." Her eyes were not just observant, they were penetrating. Ben felt as though she were scanning his very soul, and for a moment, he was terrified she would see the lie, the terrified man hiding beneath the silk and the carefully constructed persona. "Madame Rostova, it is an honor," Ben said, and the voice that came out was Bree's, a soft, measured, androgynous tone he and a vocal coach had spent weeks perfecting. "There are no honorifics here," Rostova said, a small, enigmatic smile on her lips. "Here, we are only our ideas. You are Bree. And I am Eva." She gestured to the low, comfortable-looking chairs. "Sit. Let us talk." The next few weeks were a surreal intellectual retreat. The days were spent in long, meandering conversations with Eva. Julianna would discuss the technical aspects of her new, revised designs for the museum, which were now more fluid, more organic. But it was Bree, the soul of the project, that Eva was truly interested in. She would direct her questions to Ben. "Tell me, Bree," she would ask, "if a building could dream, what would it dream of? Or, how can a physical space convey the concept of grief without resorting to sentimentality?" These were the kinds of abstract, poetic questions Ben, the novelist, had spent his life exploring. Freed from the expectation to be masculine and logical and hidden behind the safe, artistic persona of Bree, he found himself opening up in a way he never had before. He talked about narrative structure, about emotional resonance, about the way a line of prose or a line of architecture could evoke a feeling. Eva would listen, her blue eyes gleaming with an intense, focused appreciation. Julianna, for her part, would watch, a look of triumphant, vindicated pride on her face. Her gamble was paying off. Her husband, the sensitive, failing novelist, had become her greatest asset. She would take his abstract, emotional ideas from the conversations and, later that evening, brilliantly translate them into the lines and forms of her architectural models. They were a perfect, symbiotic team. Ben found himself in a strange paradox. He was living a profound, suffocating lie. But he was also, for the first time in years, feeling a sense of intellectual and creative validation. His ideas were being heard. His sensitivity was being celebrated as a strength. Eva Rostova, and by extension his own wife, was in love with his mind. The only problem was, they believed that mind belonged to a woman named Bree. The estate was not just a place of conversation, it was a place of secrets. One wing, Eva explained, was a private, state-of-the-art medical facility. For my research, she had said, her tone leaving no room for further questions. One afternoon, while Julianna was in a deep-dive session with Eva's engineers, Ben was given a rare few hours to himself. He was drawn to the estate's sprawling, multi-level biodome gardens, a lush, tropical jungle thriving in the middle of the snowy Alps. He wandered through the humid, fragrant air, a solitary, androgynous figure in soft gray silk. It was in the orchid house, a space filled with strange and beautiful, almost alien-looking flowers, that he saw him. A young man was sitting on a secluded bench, sketching in a notebook. He had a quiet, intense focus, his brow furrowed in concentration. He had dark, wavy hair and a sensitive, intelligent face. But it was his hands that caught Ben's attention. They were long, slender, and graceful, a musician's hands. The young man looked up, startled by Ben's silent approach. His eyes, a deep, soulful brown, widened in surprise. "I'm sorry," he said, his voice a soft, shy murmur. "I didn't think anyone else came in here." "I could say the same," Ben replied, Bree's gentle voice feeling natural on his tongue. He gestured to the sketchbook. "You're a very talented artist." A faint blush rose on the young man's cheeks. "Thank you. I'm Gabriel." There was a strange, almost immediate sense of recognition between them, a quiet kinship of two sensitive souls in a world of hard, futuristic surfaces. They began to talk, their conversation easy and natural. Gabriel was a musician, a gifted composer, who was staying at the estate as Eva's artist in residence. "She is my patron," Gabriel explained. "She gives me a place to work, to create, without the pressures of the outside world." Ben felt a sharp, painful pang of jealousy. This young man was living the life he had once dreamed of. "And what is it you do?" Gabriel asked. "Besides being Julianna's muse, I mean." "I'm a writer," Ben said, the word feeling both true and like a complete lie. Their conversation was interrupted by the arrival of a silent, white-uniformed attendant. "It is time for your treatment, Gabriel," the attendant said, his voice a flat, emotionless monotone. A shadow passed over Gabriel's face. The light in his eyes dimmed, replaced by a look of weary resignation. "Of course," he said. He gave Ben a small, sad smile. "It was a pleasure to meet you, Bree." He then followed the attendant out of the orchid house, leaving Ben with a profound sense of unease. What treatment did a healthy-looking young musician need? And why did the arrival of the attendant feel less like a nurse's visit and more like a guard retrieving a prisoner? He had thought this place was a sanctuary, but he was beginning to suspect that it might, in fact, be a beautiful, futuristic cage. And he wasn't the only one inside it. The encounter with Gabriel haunted Ben. It was a dissonant note in Eva Rostova's perfectly composed symphony. He began to look at the estate not as a guest, but as a novelist, searching for the subtext, the hidden story. He started paying closer attention to the attendants, to the quiet, almost invisible security protocols. He noticed that Gabriel, while treated with a kind of gentle reverence, was never truly alone. There was always a silent attendant nearby. His conversations with Julianna at night, once filled with the excitement of the project, now held a new, darker undercurrent. "Did you know Eva had an artist in residence?" he asked her one evening. "Of course," Julianna replied, not looking up from her architectural plans. "Eva is a patron of the arts. It's part of her brand. His name is Gabriel. Apparently, he's some kind of musical prodigy. There's something off about him," Ben pressed. "He seems trapped." Julianna finally looked up, a flicker of annoyance in her eyes. "Ben, please. Don't get distracted by your romantic writer's imagination. We're on the verge of winning the most important commission of our lives. Gabriel is a detail. He is not our concern. Focus on the project. Focus on being Bree." But Ben couldn't let it go. He felt a strange, protective kinship with the sad-eyed composer. He started making excuses to visit the Biodome Gardens, hoping to see him again. He found him there a few days later, sketching again, but the earlier light in his eyes was gone. He looked pale and tired. "Your treatment?" Ben asked gently, sitting beside him. "Is it for an illness?" Gabriel flinched, as if the question were a physical blow. He looked around, ensuring they were alone. "Eva believes in perfecting the human form," he whispered, his voice barely audible. "She believes traditional gender is an evolutionary dead end, a flawed blueprint. She is a pioneer in post-humanist biology." The words hung in the humid air of the orchid house. Ben felt a cold dread creeping up his spine. This wasn't just a rich woman's eccentricity. It was something far more radical and far more dangerous. "She found me," Gabriel continued, his eyes fixed on his sketchbook. "I was a young composer, struggling. She offered me the world. A place to create unlimited resources. All she asked in return was that I participate in her research. Hormonal therapies, genetic sequencing, all designed to blur the lines, to create a more evolved human specimen. A perfect androgynous artist." He finally looked at Ben, his dark eyes filled with a profound, soul-deep sorrow. "She is my patron. She is also my architect. And I am her living experiment." Ben stared at him, his mind reeling. The treatments, the medical facility. It all clicked into place with a horrifying, sickening logic. Eva Rostova wasn't just designing a museum for the future. She was trying to design the people who would inhabit it. And then, Gabriel looked at him, a new, dawning understanding in his own gaze. "Wait," he whispered. "You, Julianna's muse. The androgynous partner. The soft, artistic clothes. Your voice." He looked at Ben, truly seeing him for the first time. "Oh my God," he breathed. "You're one too, aren't you? You're another one of her projects." Ben couldn't answer. He was trapped in a lie so deep, he wasn't sure he remembered the truth anymore. Was he a novelist playing a part for his wife? Or was he just another exhibit in Eva Rostova's beautiful, terrifying collection of perfected human beings? Gabriel's mistaken assumption that Ben was another one of Eva's long-term experiments created a strange, unexpected, and incredibly dangerous bond between them. To Gabriel, Bree was not a fake identity. Bree was a fellow prisoner, a more successful, more polished version of what he was being sculpted into. "How long have you been with her?" Gabriel asked in a hushed, conspiratorial whisper during one of their secret meetings in the garden. Ben, realizing that denying it would only raise more questions and endanger them both, was forced to play along with the misunderstanding. It was a lie within a lie, a dizzying new level of deception. "A long time," he replied, Bree's soft voice filled with a carefully crafted weariness. "Julianna and Eva have known each other for years." This new, shared context of victimhood made Gabriel open up completely. He showed Ben the hidden, darker side of the sanctuary. He explained that the hormonal treatments were not optional. He spoke of the constant psychological evaluations, the subtle, ever-present surveillance. "She's trying to erase the parts of me she deems flawed," Gabriel confessed, his voice trembling. "The aggression, the ego, the masculinity. She wants to leave only the pure artist behind." Ben listened, a cold horror washing over him. He was witnessing the very real, long-term version of the temporary, superficial changes Julianna had forced upon him. The smooth skin, the softened features, the muted emotional landscape, it was all here, but magnified, made permanent and inescapable. He saw in Gabriel a terrifying reflection of what he could have become. Their secret friendship became a lifeline for them both. For Gabriel, it was the first time he had someone who understood. For Ben, it was a constant, stark reminder of the moral abyss he was skirting. He was using a simulated version of Gabriel's suffering to win a contract. The guilt was a physical weight. Julianna, for her part, was in a state of creative ecstasy. The collaboration with Bree and Eva was a resounding success. Her designs for the museum had become fluid, revolutionary, a true embodiment of Eva's vision. She and Eva would spend hours in deep, philosophical conversations, with Ben as Bree, acting as the essential bridge, translating his innate human emotion into a language of form and space that Julianna could then brilliantly execute. "We're doing it, Ben," Julianna would say to him at night, her eyes shining with a feverish, triumphant light. "She loves it. She loves us. You are magnificent as Bree. You are more useful than you have ever been." The word useful hung in the air between them. He was a tool. A beautifully designed, highly effective tool. And he was beginning to hate her for it. He would look at his wife, at this brilliant, ambitious, and utterly ruthless woman, and he would see a reflection of Eva Rostova. They were both architects, designing worlds and people to fit their own perfect, unyielding visions. The only difference was the scale of their ambition. One afternoon, in the garden, Gabriel showed Ben a piece of music he was composing. It was a haunting, achingly beautiful cello piece. "I call it the glass house," he said. "It's about this place. About being seen, but never truly known." As Ben looked at the musical notes on the page, a reckless, desperate idea began to form in his mind. It was a way to honor Gabriel's truth, a way to assuage his own crushing guilt, and a way to embed a secret, hidden message into the very heart of the project he was helping to create. He was a writer, after all. It was time he started writing his own story into this design. Ben's idea was a quiet act of architectural subversion. He began to subtly weave the themes of Gabriel's music, the story of the glass house, into the emotional narrative of the museum's design. During his conversations with Eva and Julianna, he, as Bree, started introducing new concepts. "I was thinking about the main atrium," he would say, his voice soft and thoughtful. "We've designed it to be a space of light and openness. But what if there's a whisper of melancholy in it? What if the light, instead of being purely welcoming, also feels like surveillance? Like the feeling of being beautifully, perfectly trapped?" Julianna, ever the pragmatist, would translate this into architectural form. "Interesting," she would say. "We could use a series of suspended glass panels, angled in a way that refracts the light, creating a sense of fragmentation. A beautiful, but disorienting space." Eva Rostova was enthralled. "Yes, exactly," she would exclaim. "You see, Julianna? This is the emotional depth your initial designs were missing. Bree understands. The future is not a utopia. It is a beautiful, complex cage." Ben grew bolder. He took the musical phrases from Gabriel's cello piece and, in a moment of inspired, secret rebellion, translated them into the physical design. A recurring, melancholic five-note theme became the spacing for a series of windows along a main corridor. A soaring, hopeful passage became the blueprint for a sweeping, curved staircase that led, ironically, to a dead end. The museum was no longer just a building. It was becoming a piece of music, a symphony in glass and steel. And its secret libretto was the story of Gabriel's quiet suffering. Ben was embedding a ghost of dissent into the very walls of Eva's temple to the future. This secret project gave him a new sense of purpose, but it also terrified him. He was playing a dangerous double game. He was helping Julianna win the contract of a lifetime, while simultaneously sabotaging its philosophical core. His relationship with Julianna became more strained than ever. She was thrilled with their success, with the perfect, seamless collaboration they had achieved. She saw Bree as the key, the perfected, idealized partner she had always wanted. "This is how it should always be," she said to him one night, looking at the scale model of their museum. "You and me. Perfect synergy. No more of your artistic brooding. Just clear, elegant solutions." He looked at her, at this woman who saw his soul as a problem to be solved through rebranding, and he felt a profound, unbridgeable chasm opening between them. She wasn't in love with him. She was in love with the beautifully compliant, androgynous tool she had created. The final presentation of their design was scheduled for the end of the month. It was to be a formal event, where Julianna and Bree would walk Eva through their finished concept. This would be the moment of their ultimate triumph or failure. A few days before the presentation, Gabriel gave Ben a finished, handwritten copy of his cello suite, The Glass House. "I want you to have this," he said, his voice filled with a quiet, desperate hope. "So that whatever happens, someone knows the real story." Ben took the sheet music. He looked at the beautiful, tragic notes. He now held the blueprint to the secret soul of the museum. And he knew, with a certainty that chilled him to the bone, that the final presentation was not just about winning a contract. It was about choosing a side. Was he Julianna's creation, the tool for her success? Or was he Gabriel's witness, the secret author of a story of rebellion? The day of the final presentation was a study in controlled, theatrical tension. The three of them, Eva, Julianna, and Ben as Bree, stood in the center of a holographic projection room. Around them, a stunning, three-dimensional, full-scale model of the Museum of the Future shimmered into existence. It was a masterpiece. A breathtaking, fluid, and emotionally resonant space. Julianna began to speak, her voice a confident, powerful narrative, guiding Eva through the architectural details, the flow of the spaces, the innovative use of materials. Then she turned to Ben. "And now," she said, with a proud, proprietary smile, "Bree will walk you through the emotional and philosophical heart of our design." This was the moment. Ben's heart was pounding. He had Gabriel's sheet music folded and hidden in an inside pocket of his silk tunic. He looked at Julianna, at her triumphant, expectant face. He looked at Eva, her intelligent blue eyes glowing with appreciation. Then, in his mind, he saw Gabriel, alone in his room, a prisoner in this beautiful, sterile paradise. He took a deep breath. "The heart of this museum," he began, Bree's soft, melodic voice filling the room, "is a story. It is a story of transcendence, of the evolution of the human spirit." He was reciting the lines Julianna had prepared for him. He guided Eva through the holographic model, pointing out the features he had secretly encoded. "You see here," he said, gesturing to the series of windows along the main corridor, "the spacing is irregular, but it creates a kind of visual rhythm. A 5-beat measure. It is a melody of light, designed to evoke a feeling of contemplative melancholy." "Sublime," Eva whispered, completely captivated. He led her to the sweeping, dead-end staircase. "We call this the ascent to self," he explained. "It is a journey. The visitor climbs towards the light, but arrives not at a destination, but at a mirror. A place of introspection. The journey is the point." He went through the entire design, revealing his hidden symphony piece by piece. But he framed it all in the language of Eva's own futuristic philosophy, the language of perfection, evolution, and transcendence. It was a brilliant, deceptive performance. He was showing her the truth, but telling her the lie she wanted to hear. Julianna was beaming, her pride in her creation, in the museum, and in Bree, was radiant. They had done it. They had won. The presentation concluded. Eva was silent for a long moment, a look of profound, almost religious awe on her face. "It is more than a museum," she finally said. "It is a temple. You have not just understood my vision. You have perfected it. The contract is yours, Julianna. And Bree, you are a true visionary." The relief that washed over Julianna was so immense it was almost palpable. She turned to Ben, her eyes shining with unshed tears of triumph. But Ben felt nothing but a cold, hollow ache. He had won. He had secured his wife's legacy. He had embedded Gabriel's story into the very walls of the museum. But no one would ever know its true meaning. He had been a brilliant, secret author, but his book would remain forever unread. He had saved Gabriel's soul on paper, but the man himself was still a prisoner. He had succeeded in his mission, and he had never felt more like a failure. That evening, a formal dinner was held to celebrate the signing of the contract. It was an intimate affair, just the three of them, in Eva's private dining pod overlooking the snow-capped mountains. The atmosphere was triumphant. Julianna was radiant, Eva was gracious, and Ben, as Bree, was the quiet, enigmatic muse at the center of it all. But Ben felt like a ghost at the feast. He had been so close to telling the truth, and he had faltered. He had chosen the safe path, the path that secured Julianna's success, but left his own conscience in tatters. As the dinner was winding down, Eva turned to him. "Bree," she said, her blue eyes gleaming. My artist in residence, Gabriel, has composed a new piece. A cello suite. He tells me it was inspired by the spirit of our project. As a celebration, I have arranged for him to perform its debut for us now. Ben's blood ran cold. No, it was a trap. A test. Or a coincidence so cruel it felt like a deliberate act of fate. Eva gestured to the far end of the room. A set of hidden doors slid open, revealing a small, recessed alcove. Gabriel was sitting there, a cello resting against his shoulder. He looked pale and fragile under the soft lights, a condemned man about to play his own eulogy. He met Ben's eyes for a fraction of a second, and in his gaze was a look of profound, heartbreaking despair. He thought Bree had betrayed him, had used his pain and sold it as a design concept. Gabriel began to play. The music that filled the glass pod was the most beautiful, tragic sound Ben had ever heard. It was the glass house. It was the melody of the windows, the soaring notes of the dead-end staircase. It was the secret soul of the museum, being played aloud. Julianna listened with a detached, aesthetic appreciation. "How lovely," she murmured. "It's so architectural." She had no idea she was listening to her own building's secret blueprint. But Eva was listening differently. She was not just hearing the music, she was recognizing it. Her brow furrowed, a look of intense, analytical concentration on her face. She was hearing the themes, the phrases, the very rhythms that Bree had described to her as the melody of light and the ascent to self. She was connecting the music to the architecture. And she was realizing that this was not a piece inspired by the project. This was the project's source code. Ben watched her, his heart hammering. He saw the moment of dawning realization in her eyes, the moment her sharp, brilliant mind pieced it all together. The muse had not been a muse. The muse had been a plagiarist. A spy. Eva didn't look angry. She looked intrigued. Her gaze shifted from Gabriel to Ben, and a slow, dangerous, and deeply unsettling smile spread across her face. She had been deceived, but she was a woman who appreciated a truly elegant, audacious piece of design, even if it was a lie. Gabriel finished the final, sorrowful note, the sound hanging in the silent room. "Bravo, Gabriel," Eva said, her voice a soft, chilling purr. She then turned her full, penetrating attention to Ben. "And you, Bree? It seems you're an even more complex work of art than I had imagined. You have a secret. I wonder what other secrets you might be keeping." The game was up. The lie was exposed. But the checkmate had not played out as he had expected. He was not being dismissed. He was being studied. Eva Rostova had just discovered a new, far more interesting project to analyze. And Ben, trapped in his beautiful androgynous costume, was the specimen. The air in the room was thick with unspoken truths. Gabriel sat frozen, cello in hand. Ben, as Bree, was pinned by Eva's sharp, analytical gaze. But it was Julianna who finally broke the silence. She was not a fool. She had seen the look on Eva's face. She had heard the direct correspondence between Gabriel's music and Bree's supposed inspirations. Her brilliant, architectural mind, a mind that saw patterns everywhere, had pieced together the stunning, humiliating truth in a matter of seconds. Her muse, her creation, her husband, had been working with a collaborator. He had betrayed their perfect, symbiotic partnership. "What is this?" Julianna demanded, her voice a low, trembling hiss. She was not looking at Eva. She was looking at Ben. "What have you done?" "I believe," Eva interjected, her voice a smooth, amused purr, enjoying the chaos she had orchestrated, "that Bree has been engaging in a rather profound act of unauthorized creative sourcing." He was telling a story, Ben said, and Bree's soft voice was gone, replaced by his own, raw and unapologetic. "A true story. One that I was helping you steal." The sound of his own, masculine voice in that room, after a month of careful, constant performance, was a detonation. Julianna stared at him, her face a mask of pure, horrified disbelief. The beautiful, compliant tool she had created had just revealed itself to be a Trojan horse. The perfect design had a fatal, hidden flaw. "You lied to me," she whispered, the words filled with a venomous, personal betrayal. All of it. A lie. You built me out of a lie, he shot back, all his pent-up frustration and guilt erupting. You wanted a muse? A soul for your project? Well, you got one. You got Gabriel's. He's been the ghostwriter for this entire goddamn project, and you were too busy admiring your own reflection in the glass to even notice. Silence, both of you, Eva commanded, and the sheer, cold authority in her voice made them both flinch. She rose from her chair and walked slowly to stand in front of the two architects of her museum. The contract is signed, Julianna. The museum will be built. Your legacy is secure. She then turned her gaze to Ben. And the story embedded within it, the story of the beautiful, trapped thing, is exquisite. It gives the building a soul I could not have anticipated. A tragic, secret heart. She was not angry. She was thrilled. She had not just commissioned a building, she had acquired a living piece of art, a narrative filled with deception, suffering, and betrayal. It was the ultimate testament to her own complex, post-humanist worldview. She then made her final, chilling pronouncement. Julianna, she said, the technical work is done. Your services are no longer required here. You may return home. The project will be managed by my team from now on. Julianna looked stunned. What? But, the project. The project is secure, Eva repeated. She then looked at Ben. Bree, however, will remain. As will Gabriel. The two halves of my museum's soul. I have a great many questions for them. I am a patron of the arts, after all. And I find I am very, very interested in their collaborative process. It was a dismissal. And a capture. Julianna, the master architect, was being fired from her own masterpiece. And Ben, the man who had only wanted to go home, was now a permanent part of the collection, a beautiful, androgynous specimen to be studied, alongside Gabriel, in Eva Rostova's futuristic, alpine prison. Julianna had brought her muse to the mountain, and the mountain had decided to keep him. Julianna left the next morning. There was no dramatic farewell. Just a brief, cold exchange in the silent, white corridor outside Ben's room. You chose him, she said, her voice a flat, dead thing. You chose a stranger over me. Over us. You chose a contract over me a long time ago, Ben replied, looking at the woman who was now a stranger to him. You didn't want a husband. You wanted a blueprint you could build from. Eva just offered a more permanent installation. She stared at him for a long moment, her eyes filled with a chilling mixture of hatred and something that looked like loss. Then, she turned and walked away without another word. The architect was leaving her most flawed, uncontrollable design behind. Ben's life and Gabriel's entered a new surreal phase. They were no longer prisoners in the traditional sense. They were Eva's prized possessions, her living art. They were given free rein of the estate, treated with a strange, reverent respect by the silent attendants. They were given the finest food, the most beautiful, androgynous clothes from Eva's personal couturier, and unlimited resources for their creative work. Eva would summon them for long, analytical conversations. She would have Gabriel compose music, and then have Ben translate the emotional themes into written prose or philosophical concepts. She was studying them, dissecting their collaborative, empathetic process, trying to reverse engineer the very nature of human creativity. Your minds, she told them one afternoon, are a perfect synthesis. The pure, emotional logic of the musician and the structured, narrative logic of the writer. One masculine, one feminine, according to the old ways. But together, you create something new. Something post-gender. Something evolved. They were her prize specimens, a living proof of her theories. But the cage, no matter how beautiful, was still a cage. They were under constant, subtle surveillance. Their communications with the outside world were monitored. They were free to wander the vast estate, but they knew they could never truly leave. Ben, stripped of his own name and his past, found himself becoming more like the person Eva saw him as. The role of Bree, once a performance, was now simply his reality. The hormonal therapy Eva's medical team now oversaw was at a higher, more consistent dosage. His body, his voice, his very thoughts were slowly, irrevocably aligning with the androgynous ideal she was curating. He was becoming a work of art, and in the process, the man he had been was fading like an old photograph. He and Gabriel became each other's only anchor in this strange, rarefied world. Their friendship deepened into a profound, unspoken bond. They were the only two people on Earth who understood the truth of their shared existence. One evening, they were in the biodome garden, the one place they felt they could speak without being overheard by the AI. "Do you ever think about escape?" Ben whispered, the word feeling heavy and dangerous. Gabriel looked out at the snowy, impassable mountain peaks that surrounded the estate. "Where would we go?" he replied, his voice filled with a weary resignation. "Out there, we are just strange, broken things. At least in here, we're art." The resignation in his voice terrified Ben. Gabriel was beginning to believe in the logic of the cage. And Ben, looking at his own reflection in the glass of the biodome, at the elegant, soft-featured person he had become, was horrified to realize that a part of him was beginning to understand. The museum, a colossal monument to their captivity, was being built thousands of miles away. Eva would sometimes show them the construction progress on the holographic displays, a constant, galling reminder of the beautiful prison they had designed. But Ben, the novelist, had not given up on the idea of a final chapter. He had embedded a story in the walls of the museum. Now he had to find a way to send the key to that story out into the world. His chance came in the form of a small, unexpected act of rebellion from Julianna. 6 months after she had left, a package arrived for him. It was a single, hardbound copy of his first, commercially failed novel, The Echo Chamber. Eva's security team scanned it for any electronic devices and, finding none, allowed him to have it. It seemed like a final, cruel parting gift from his ex-wife. A reminder of his failure. But Ben knew Julianna. Nothing she did was without purpose. He took the book to his room and examined it with a writer's eye. And he found it. On page 84, a single letter in the text was infinitesimally bolder than the rest. N.A. He scanned the next few pages. Another bolded letter. C. He spent the entire night going through the book, his heart pounding. It was an acrostic cipher, a secret message hidden in the text. Julianna, in her own cold, architectural way, was sending him a tool. The decoded message was a single string of characters, a complex password. But a password to what? He couldn't risk using the estate's monitored systems. He needed a way to get a message out. He thought of the constant, invisible surveillance. The AI that governed the estate saw everything. But what if he could use the AI's own logic against it? The AI, which Eva called the Oracle, was a learning system. It monitored their conversations to better understand the creative process. Ben began a new, subtle performance. In his conversations with Gabriel, he started deliberately talking about his old life as a writer, framing his past as a narrative experiment. He spoke of an unfinished digital manuscript, a project he had abandoned, which explored themes of artistic captivity and hidden truths. He was planting a seed in the AI's mind, creating a digital breadcrumb trail. He was building a narrative that the Oracle would log and categorize. His plan was audacious. He knew from his early days at the estate that there was a single, weekly data burst sent out from the facility to an off-site server for backup. It was a tiny, momentary crack in the otherwise closed system. He needed to piggyback a message on that data burst. He and Gabriel, under the guise of a collaborative session, used a music composition software on a non-networked tablet. Gabriel would write a line of music, and Ben would write a corresponding line of poetic analysis. But what he was really writing, character by painful character, was a manifesto. A confession. The true story of the glass house, of Eva's experiments, of his own forced transformation. It was the key to the museum's secret. The final piece was Julianna's password. It was the key to an anonymous, encrypted email account she had set up years ago. The recipient was a single, famous investigative journalist known for taking down powerful, corrupt figures. Now, all he had to do was get the message from the tablet to the outside world. And for that, he would need to get past the all-seeing eye of the Oracle. Ben's plan hinged on a single, elegant piece of psychological manipulation, aimed not at a person, but at a machine. He knew the Oracle was programmed to archive all of their creative output. He also knew it was programmed with Eva's own biases. It valued art, it valued data, and it was obsessively curious about the synthesis between the two. The night of the weekly data burst, he and Gabriel initiated their final performance. They went to the central conversation pod, the heart of the Oracle's sensory network. "I have finished the manuscript," Ben announced to Gabriel, Bree's voice filled with a quiet, artistic excitement. "The one I was telling you about. The ghost in the machine. It's my final analysis of our collaborative process here." He took out the tablet, on which he had saved their manifesto, disguised as a simple text file. "I want to integrate it," he said, using one of Eva's favorite buzzwords. "I want to pair my text with your music, Gabriel." As a final, synthesized piece of art. He connected the tablet to the room's high-resolution sound system. He opened the music composition software. "The Oracle," he said, speaking to the room itself, "I am initiating a creative synthesis. Please observe and archive." The AI's calm, disembodied voice replied, "Acknowledged." Monitoring creative process. Gabriel began to play a piece of music from his tablet, not the glass house, but a frantic, complex, and data-rich composition he had written specifically for this purpose. It was designed to consume a massive amount of the AI's processing power as it analyzed the complex musical structures. While the AI was distracted, listening to the music, Ben executed his plan. He opened the text file, the manifesto. He quickly copied the entire block of text. Then, he opened a separate, secure messaging app he had hidden on the tablet, a simple program that could be triggered by a single keystroke to send its contents to a pre-programmed address. He pasted the text. He typed in the anonymous email address from Julianna's cipher. And then, he typed her password. He took a deep breath. This was it. And now, he said to the room, for the benefit of the Oracle, the final, emotional integration. He hit send. For a split second, nothing happened. Then a tiny, almost imperceptible flicker in the room's ambient lighting. The Oracle's calm voice came through the speakers, a fraction of a second slower than usual. "Data anomaly detected. Rerouting processing power. Creative synergy is logged." It was done. The message in a bottle had been thrown into the digital ocean. They had no way of knowing if it would ever be received, or if the journalist would even believe their insane story. But they had acted. They had rebelled. They sat in silence as Gabriel's frantic music finished, their hearts pounding in the quiet that followed. They had poked the dragon. Now, all they could do was wait and see if it would wake up. For the first time in months, the future was not a straight, pre-designed line. It was a terrifying, wonderful unknown. For 3 weeks, nothing happened. The silence from the outside world was absolute, and a cold, creeping despair began to settle over Ben. He started to believe their message had been lost, a digital ghost unheard. The perfect, sterile routine of the estate continued, each day a beautiful, monotonous repetition of the one before. Eva continued her studies of them, her intellectual curiosity as intense and unsettling as ever. The news, when it broke, did not come as a whisper. It was a global, thermonuclear explosion. The journalist had not just published their story, she had used their manifesto, the Glass House Confession, as she called it, as the centerpiece of a massive, multi-part exposé on Eva Rostova. She had corroborated their claims with off-the-record sources, disgruntled former employees, and deep financial investigations. The story was a sensation. It was a lurid, gothic tale of futurism, hubris, and monstrous ethical breaches. The reclusive benefactor was revealed to be a mad scientist, her alpine sanctuary a laboratory for unsanctioned human experimentation. Gabriel's story, and the story of the nameless others who had come before him, became a rallying cry for victims of the powerful and unregulated tech elite. And at the heart of it all was the story of the museum and the strange, beautiful, androgynous muse named Bree. Eva Rostova, the untouchable guru, was suddenly besieged. Governments launched investigations. Her corporate partners distanced themselves. Her carefully constructed world, her perfect, sterile image, was shattered. They watched the fallout from inside the glass house. The Oracle, the estate's AI, presented them with the news feeds without comment, a neutral observer to its own creator's immolation. Eva did not rage. She did not panic. She simply withdrew. She sealed herself in her private wing, her grand experiment in perfecting humanity, having been declared a monstrous failure by the flawed, chaotic world she had tried to escape. One morning, Ben and Gabriel woke up to a new kind of silence. The silent, white-uniformed attendants were gone. The security protocols were offline. The invisible walls of the cage had dissolved. They walked through the silent, empty corridors of the estate, two ghosts in a beautiful, abandoned museum. They were free. They found a single helicopter on the main helipad, its pilot waiting with a simple, printed message. It was from Julianna. "I owed you one. The jet is waiting in Zurich. Come home." As the helicopter lifted off, Ben looked down at the glass and steel sanctuary that had been his prison. He felt a strange, complex mixture of hatred, grief, and a bizarre, lingering sense of belonging. He had lost a wife, a name, a gender. He had been deconstructed and redesigned. He looked over at Gabriel, who was staring out the window, his face a mask of disbelief and dawning, fragile hope. They were not the same people who had entered this place. They were survivors. They were art. Flawed, beautiful, and finally, irrevocably, free. The glass house had been shattered, and they were stepping out into the messy, imperfect, and wonderfully unpredictable real world. The return to the real world was a disorienting, painful rebirth. Ben and Gabriel were the quiet, human faces at the center of a global media firestorm. They were hounded by reporters, hailed as heroes by activists, and treated as tragic curiosities by the world at large. Julianna, true to her word, provided a safe harbor. She used her formidable skills not for ambition, but for protection, creating a legal and logistical fortress around them, giving them a quiet space to heal. Her relationship with Ben was a ruin, but a ruin built on a new, strange kind of foundation. The love was gone, but it had been replaced by a complex, weary respect. "I designed a monster," she told him one evening, in a rare moment of introspection. "Both in that museum and in what I did to you. I'm sorry." It was the closest she could come to an apology, and he knew it was the truest thing she had ever said. Gabriel, with the best medical care, began the slow, difficult process of reversing the hormonal treatments and reclaiming his body. But the psychological scars remained. He found he could no longer compose music. The wellspring of his creativity had been tainted, inextricably linked to his trauma. Ben's journey was even more complex. The hormones, the training, the deep, long-term inhabitation of Bree, they were not things that could be simply washed off like makeup. The person he had been, the novelist named Ben, was a ghost. But Bree was a role he no longer wanted to play. He was left in a strange, liminal space, a person who fit no easy category. He looked at his reflection, the soft features, the slender body, the androgynous grace that was now simply him. To try and force himself back into the mold of Ben felt as artificial as the initial transformation into Bree. He did not go back on hormones to reverse the effects. He did not cut his hair. He did not change the soft, elegant clothes he had grown accustomed to. He was no longer a man in a woman's costume. He was a new person, forged in a crucible of deception and trauma. And that person, he was beginning to realize, was not a man. The final piece of the puzzle fell into place a year later. Gabriel, still struggling to find his music, was sitting at a piano, his hands hovering over the keys in silent frustration. Ben, who now went by Benny, a soft, gentle name that felt like his own, sat beside him. "I can't hear it anymore," Gabriel whispered, his voice full of despair. "The music. It's gone." Benny reached out and placed a hand on his friend's shoulder. "Maybe you're trying to play the old songs," she said, her voice, the soft, melodic voice of Bree that was now her own, filled with a quiet, hard-won wisdom. "Maybe it's time to write a new one." And as she spoke, she realized she was not just talking to him. She was talking to herself. She sat down at the piano. Her hands, no longer the novelist's or the architect's muse, found the keys. She began to play, not a complex sonata, but a simple, searching melody. It was a sound that was both sad and hopeful, a piece that was not about a glass house, but about the quiet, difficult, and beautiful process of building a home inside oneself. Gabriel listened, and for the first time in a long time, a flicker of understanding, of inspiration, returned to his eyes. He began to play a soft harmony alongside her melody. Benny closed her eyes, the music flowing through her. She was not Ben. She was not Bree. She was a survivor. She was a friend. She was a musician, finding her own, true voice at last. The score of her life was unwritten. And for the first time, she was ready to compose.